Hey guys, this is Echo Sours with a tutorial for ADSR sounds and MassiveSynth.com. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, you can sign up at youtube.com/ADSR Tuts. That's Tuts. So this is kind of a special tutorial / overview of a couple sounds from my new sound set, Massive Beast Volume 2, being sold exclusively on ADSR Sounds. I wanted to show you how to create a lead and then two basses from it. So we're going to kind of be talking about bass layering. But the lead I wanted to show you how to recreate was this, it's called Rexus. It's these two blue tracks you'll see. This first instance is just it kind of playing a monophonic progression with some sidechain compression via the LFO tool. And then this track right here are the chords. And the reason why I wanted to show you how to make this sound is because I've gotten some requests, and I just know from just producing and sound design in general that creating a supersaw sound that is not only usable but kind of interesting can be difficult. And so one way that you can do that in Massive, there's a few tricks you can do to kind of make it stand out from just a plethora of other supersaw sounds that kind of dominate modern EDM and music. So this is that sound without the sidechain compression on. And then with the mod wheel that's assigned. So it's a pretty cool, expressive, pretty usable sound. And I layered that with another lead that wasn't as saw oriented. It's kind of more just gritty. But those two kind of sounds and ideas layered together gets a really good big result. And the first bass that we'll be recreating is this, it's called Good Detune. It's a really good meaty low end bass, kind of analog sounding. And it's mixed with and blended with this bass called DIDGIDOO, which is the opposite. It's very, very digital sounding. So let's jump right into this and recreate the lead called Rexus. I'll loop it. And then we will do a new sound. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do is, obviously there's going to be a saw element to this because it's kind of a super saw-ish sound. So what you're going to do in oscillator 1 is you're going to grab the square saw 2 waveform and turn the wave table position to just a little bit above halfway. So we're introducing a little bit of the square wave. You're going to keep it on spectrum. You're going to keep the pitch where it is. Just turn the intensity down a little and turn the amp down to about halfway. All right, and then I'm going to jump down to oscillator 3 because when I made this sound, it initially was a stack of 3 oscillators, but I ended up just using oscillator 1 and 3. You could easily turn on oscillator 2 and layer in another element of the square saw 1 or square saw 2 to kind of boost that super saw feel. But for this, let's just use 1 and 3. So I used kind of a cool waveform. It's one of my favorite ones actually in Massive. It's called Squelchy, and it's under the this digital hybrid here. And when you put it into the oscillator, it'll actually say Skelchy instead of the QUE. It'll change it to a K, but it's the same one. And that, if I solo, it sounds like this. It's really, really digital sounding. And it's really low pitched by default. It kind of has a lower timbre than a lot of the other wavetables in Massive. So I'm going to pitch this up to positive 12. And then change this to bend plus and turn the wave table position down to about 70% around there. And I'm going to turn this slider down. I've gotten in the habit of not really doing a whole lot with the amps, and I'll just, if I'm using a 1 filter sound, and I kind of use these as volume sliders, but you can turn the amp down or the filter 1, filter 2 slider, because we're only going to be using the first filter in this sound. So I'm just turning down the volume of it a little. All right, so that's the two oscillator step. Now let's go down to the modulation oscillator. And in that, you're going to add some phase modulation to the first oscillator. So click on phase, click on this little one here, which will turn it on. And now this knob here will add phase just to that oscillator. So I'm going to turn it down though. I'm going to turn it down to maybe 25, 30, 35% around there. And then keeping with the oscillators, let's go down to the noise oscillator. And I'm going to turn it to a bright noise type. And I'm going to turn the amp up a good chunk. All right, so that's how it should be sounding right now. And let's go to the voicing tab, which is going to be really important for this. Turn the unisono or the voice count up to 3. And then activate the pitch cutoff. This is what's going to introduce that supersaw sound. But you'll notice if you kind of crank this slider up and you keep the value at 1 or even above 1, it's almost it's too much. So what I'll do is I will actually just pitch this up or down by a more of a kind of a fine increment. So I'm going to pitch down to negative 0.40, and then it will allow me to boost this a little higher. Without making the sound unusable. So I'm going to boost it to a shade under halfway. And now let's turn on the pan position to make this give it that real wide sound that supersaw sounds typically will have. And I'm going to turn it a little bit back towards this mono line so the pan or the so the phase correlation doesn't get completely out of whack. Okay, and then let's go to the oscillator tab real quick, and I'm going to just clear out this vibrato. The actual patch in Massive Beast 2 comes with all 8 macros, but I'm not going to have time to recreate those, so I will turn off the vibrato because it wasn't used by default in that lead sound. But turn the depth up a little, and then turn the rate up a hair as well. And that pretty much sets up the oscillators and kind of just the general brain, I guess, settings of the voicing and the vibrato. So let's move on to the filter. In this filter 1, I'm going to select a scream waveform. I'm going to turn the cutoff up a good chunk, which we will be modulating, and turn the scream down all the way because we'll be modulating that with a couple controls here, and also turn the resonance down. All right, so now time for the modulation, and I'm going to create some custom envelope shapes to modulate a few different parameters here. In envelope 1, turn your attack down, keep the level up, turn the decay down a good amount, and then boost this release. So when you get the decay down a little and the release up, this line right here should kind of be in the word reset somewhere. All right, keep this on gate, and then turn the level down a good amount, to about 25-30%. Now we're going to take this, and I'm going to modulate this first box here in my cutoff 1. So what you're going to do is, if you have your cutoff knob to where it needs to be, about 65-70%, you're going to take this and modulate downwards. So now all the cutoff frequencies in the scream filter above this parameter where this little tick mark is on the cutoff knob is being controlled by this envelope. So it's more of a controlled usable sound, especially in a context of a mix. And now we're going to take, we're going to actually move to envelope 3 right now. And in envelope 3, we're going to create a similar shape, but it's more tight and controlled, I guess. So turn the attack all the way down, turn the level down to about halfway, turn the decay down almost all the way, and turn the level down pretty much all the way. And what we're doing right now is we're trying to create a instance of something that we can modulate the pitch of. So you're going to keep the release where it is. So let's drag this into the sidechain box of oscillator 1 and crank that up to 64. I'm just dragging out the decay so I can kind of hear what's going on with it. And we're going to do that same thing in oscillator 3. Crank it up to 64 again. See if you crank the decay too much, it sounds like a laser sound. We're just trying to introduce a little bit of attack, or a little bit of snap to the attack, rather, I should say. So it cuts through. All right, that squares that away. Now go to envelope 4, which we have to change if you don't want that default shape, this one going on, because it's tied to the amp mod by default. So I'm going to take the attack all the way down. I'm going to keep the level where it is, turn the decay up actually, turn the level down under halfway, and then boost this release above halfway. Kind of sounds like there's reverb on that, and that's how it should sound. Alright, now we're going to take one of these internal macro controls, the velocity one, and I'm going to modulate the level just a little bit with the velocity. Alright, and now that we're kind of messing around with that velocity control, I'm going to take this up to the scream knob in the filter, and I'm going to modulate just a little bit. And now take this 4th envelope crosshair, and we're going to pop it into a couple instances on our filter. So with the cutoff, you're going to drag downwards with it. And on the scream, you're going to drag out to well above halfway. All right, and finally, I'm going to use one instance of the LFO to modulate another destination within the oscillator. So select your 5th LFO here, or any of them for that matter. It won't make too much of a difference. And then just keep it on this sine wave and keep the rate and the amp pretty much where they're at, so I'm not doing anything too crazy or special. And then drag it into that first available box on the oscillator 1 and just pitch it down to 0.25. It'll be a subtle difference, but just doing one more thing to kind of make the sound bigger. All right, now for the effects and the EQ, and that will pretty much round things out. So select reverb on FX1, turn the dry wet down a good amount, and then that will allow you to boost the size without killing all of the sound and making it extremely muddy. I'm gonna turn this color up. When you turn it up to the right, the reverb gets a little bit brighter sounding. All right, that sounds good. Now I'm gonna go to this second FX slot, and I'm gonna select delayed sync. And in that, have a ratio of both 4 and 16 for both the left and right. And turn the dry wet down a good chunk, turn the damp down, which kind of takes out some of the muddiness if you have the feedback up a little bit, but turn the feedback down to around the same point as the damp. And now I'm going to cut a little bit of the low, and then cut this frequency right here, and then boost the highs. And then, of course, what you could do is you could create a, you could tie this to the side, you could tie a cutoff to the side chain, which is how the preset's actually set up in the pack, but it will allow you to control the cutoff. So it's actually can be turned into a good pluck really easily. But that is that sound that was called Rexus. It's kind of a cool super sounding lead. So let's jump into now creating one of these basses. Now the good thing about that bass is it's pretty easy to make, and it's a good foundation for a bass sound in a track in that it has a good amount of low end. So let me create a new instance of Massive here and copy and paste down that MIDI pattern. All right, so I'm gonna make a brand new sound. So this is, all right. And like I said, I'm going for analog with this because I was thinking the whole time that I wanted to layer it with 2 instances of massive to kind of get a really unique bass sound instead of just getting one that we've all heard, because massive has been around for a while. It's an extremely popular synth, and with only 3 oscillators and these waveforms that haven't been updated in a long time, to really get into it and kind of create new and unique basses, if massive is one of the only soft synths you have or own, what you can do is just open up another instance and kind of think ahead, carve out certain frequencies, use certain filter types in each instance of massive so they kind of blend and play together nicely. So in oscillator 1, I'm going to select one of these analog electric forms. It's going to be this dirty needle, but it'll just say needle in the actual oscillator section. I'm going to pitch this down to -12, and you're going to keep it on spectrum. Turn the wavetable position down a little because otherwise it's too harsh sounding and too kind of brittle. And let's play what we have. So this is what you should have so far. All right, go to oscillator 2, activate it. Select the sine square wave, and you're gonna turn down the wavetable position down to around halfway. And I'm gonna pitch this down to -12.15, so a little bit of detune, give it that kind of analog vibe. All right, in oscillator 3, activate that. Arrow over 1 to get the square saw 2 waveform. And we're going to turn the wavetable position down all the way to the square side of the spectrum and pitch this down to -1183. So 11.83. All right, turn the intensity down just a smidge, and that'll pretty much round out the 3 main oscillators. I'm going to turn on this modulation oscillator. I'm going to select FM, filter FM. I'm going to pitch this up to +16, and then turn the FM or filter slider down a good amount. And that will be a really subtle effect, but I used it in the original sound. Then I'm going to add a little bit of white noise just to kind of spruce the top end up a pinch. Let's double back to oscillator 3. Forgot to do something. So turn the type to bend plus, so it'll be a little bit more nasally, a bit brighter sounding. Now that we got the oscillators taken care of, I'm going to turn on the feedback and then just boost it a little and turn up the F1 slider, because that's the only filter we will be using for the sound. Now activate the insert 1 and select bit crusher. And I did something some of you may not have seen, but some of you probably have. I'm going to be modulating this with not only an envelope, but I'm going to be controlling it via the sidechain control with a macro. And I'll get into why I do it that way and how it offers more control, and I'll show you A and B versus Y if you set it up sidechain or if you just kind of macro it with a cutoff control. So turn the dry wet and the crush down all the way for now, because we will be modulating that. So let's go to this macro control, and I'm going to clear it, and then I'm going to name it cutoff. And what we're going to do now is let's activate filter 1 and select low pass 4, because we're going for a more of an analog sound, so I wouldn't be using scream or acid or something like that. And the cutoff, you're going to keep it where it is. You can boost it a little if you'd like. Turn the resonance down almost all the way. And that's what you should have. Okay, so let's go now to our first envelope, which we'll be using to modulate the bit crusher and cutoff. And you're going to turn the attack down all the way. You're going to keep the decay where it is. You're going to turn the level down all the way and just boost the release. So this line right here should start to be in this word linear, and keep it on gate. Now take this and you're going to pop it in this first box here on your cutoff and modulate all the way out. And now you're going to take that same envelope and modulate the first two boxes left and right on the insert 1 just a little bit. Okay, and now you're going to take this cutoff that we created and pop it into the filter 1 sidechain box and the bit crush sidechain box. So right now, if we play around with this, it's not going to do anything. Click on this little SC here and click arrow up. So now it's controlled by this envelope. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. So it's already dropped in. Click on the sidechain, click arrow up. And now you can see that this is all the way down, and you don't see that typical yellow line going downwards on the cutoff that's affecting the sound. So if I turn this up, there's the sound. And now the difference being, if I turn off this sidechain here and just kind of crank that up, it gets more unruly. So that's why I'm using the sidechain. Okay, so let's go to our voicing tab. Make sure it's on Unisano. I'm gonna check monophonic for this. I'm gonna go to my oscillator tab and turn down the glide. And now let's go to our fourth envelope because that's tied to the amp mod by default. Keep the attack pretty much where it is. You can turn it all the way down if you'd want, but turn the decay up for this. Turn the level down, and now crank this release up. All right, and I'm going to now go to my first FX1 slot, and I'm going to select the reverb and turn the dry wet down, the size down, the density and the color down a little. All right, and then in FX2, I used delayed sync and just barely had it represented, but I selected a left time of 1/16, which is pretty quick, and then 1/8 for the right time. Turn the dry wet down almost all the way, the damp down to about 20%, and the feedback down a lot as well. Just using that to thicken things up. And like I mentioned before, I'm trying to think ahead in this whole process of, okay, I'm making a analog sounding style bass. What do I want to do to make it more interesting? So I'm using this. This turned out as a good kind of a foundational bass. Good amount of low end. So I'm going to turn the high shelf down a little. And then slightly boost the low shelf and that boost. All right, and so I think on the original one I had a little bit more reverb there, so let's turn that up. All right, so let's go on to this patch called DIDGIDOO. Now this is the really interesting one, because if you layer these two together, you get some pretty cool results. So let's play those two together. So I'm going to make a new instance of Massive, drop this down. All right, so in oscillator 1, you're going to select a very, very digital waveform because we're layering it with that more analog sounding bass. I'm going to select the multiplex, so if I play this. Turn the intensity down to halfway. And turn the amp down to halfway. Keep the pitch and spectrum and all that where it is. So now let's go to oscillator 2, and I'm going to select that squelchy wave that we used before. And I'm going to keep it on spectrum. But turn the wave tail position down just a little bit above 0 on the left-hand side. Turn the intensity down and keep the amp where it is. So we got a really digital sound going on right now. And then select oscillator 3, turn it on, keep it on square saw 1, keep the wave tail position up all the way, the intensity up all the way. Let's turn the amp down to under halfway. And I'm going to pitch that up to positive 24. All right, activate the modulation oscillator. And then in that, on the first one, select the ring mod. Pitch the whole pitch up for the modulation oscillator to positive 12. Turn this ring mod down a little bit and select filter 2. So we're just adding a little bit of harmonics to it, I guess. And in the FM box, we're going to select that, turn it on for select 1 for the oscillator 1, and now for the actual amount that you're going to apply, you're going to turn it down, and we'll end up modulating this with an envelope here in a little bit. right, now go down to your first insert and select this S shaper, which is the sine shaper. And on the dry wet, you're going to turn it up just a hair. Turn the drive down a little bit under halfway. Okay, activate insert 2, and then you're going to select this hard clipper and it will display as clip. Turn the dry wet all the way up and turn the drive down a little. You'll notice that there's not really doing anything to the sound. And that is because you have to have your routing set up properly to introduce that. So click on this routing tab and see how insert 1, insert 2 are happening right there. We'll now make insert 2 happen over here. And now you have both of the insert effects happening. Okay, so that squares away all the oscillators, the noise, the modulation oscillator, and the inserts. Now let's go to our voicing tab. And in the voicing tab, make sure you have unisono as 1. I'm going to select monophonic here. And I'm going to keep it on always for the trigger type. And then I'm going to go to my first oscillator. And because it's a kind of a bass sound, I don't want to have this vibrato attached to my first macro, but I do want some vibrato in this because I was kind of going for like a didgeridoo sound. That's why it's called digidoo. And then select restart via gate, so it's more of a consistent tone. Okay, so now let's go to our filter 1 and select daft. And now in that, keep the cutoff where it is, turn the resonance down a little. And that's what you'll have going on right now. So let's take this first crosshair on this empty macro now. Take this, drag it out all the way in the cutoff, and I'm going to title this cutoff. All right, and now let's go to our envelopes because we got to modulate some things with those. So in our first envelope, what you're going to do is we're going to use that shape that I use all the time to kind of modulate the pitch. So keep the attack all the way down. Keep the level all the way up. Turn the decay down for this pretty much all the way. And now we're going to leave the level up just a hair for this. Usually I'll turn it down all the way, but I'm going to take this and modulate the pitch of oscillator 1. It's not going to have a huge effect to the sound, but we're trying to just do little things to make it more nasally. All right, now go to your FM here, which should still be selected in the modulation oscillator. Take the envelope 1 crosshair and modulate out all the way. It's going to get some nice grit to it now. And now let's go to our second envelope here. And in this envelope, we're going to use this to modulate the cutoff of filter 1. Turn the attack all the way down, keep the level up, turn this decay down a little, and turn this level down a good chunk, and boost the release a little. So this line should now be somewhere in the word linear, and keep it on gate. So take this and modulate your cutoff filter down to about halfway from that yellow line to finish, start to finish. All right, and now I'm going to turn on this feedback here. I'm going to turn it up to about this line is almost even with the letter A. All right, now let's go to our FX here. So in FX1, I selected the dimension expander to make this thing wider and have some more stereo presence. So the dry wet, I ended up turning down. Turn down the size. But it sounds bigger now, which is cool. So then I selected this delayed sync. And the dry wet turned down almost all the way, the damp down almost all the way, and the feedback just a pinch above the damp. And I had 416 and 316 for the times. So it should sound like such. And now I turn on your EQ, and we're going to make this a little bit more nasally. So I'm going to boost this low shelf a little. I'm going to crank this boost all the way up. And there you have kind of that really nasally sounding. So let me turn this low shelf down a little. right, so that pretty much squares out that sound. So what you can do, I had some sidechain compression on it. If I play that with the bass that we made, it's a much more interesting bass sound. Then you wouldn't be able to achieve that sound necessarily, obviously, using one instance of massive. It just wouldn't be doable because you're only afforded those 3 oscillators. All right, so that's pretty much the end of this tutorial. We looked at how to create a interesting supersaw sound. And we made 2 bass patches and layered them together to get this. And like I said, these are all sounds from Massive Beast 2. Check it out on ADSRsounds.com. If you have any questions on how to recreate these sounds or just anything I covered on this video, ask in the comment section below. And like always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.